Hi, this is Jonathan. So this is going to be the next phase of getting out the information that I need to get out in this time slot of existence.
In the mid-2000s, an account called adampants 2007 joined YouTube. The creator of this account was an anonymous American physician named Jonathan, who posted a unique 4-hour upload called The Healing Begins Now. In this recording, Jonathan provides a deep breakdown of our place in the universe, largely explained using chemistry, biology, and physiology. He made compelling claims that indicated humanity may be impacting our planet as a disease, suggesting humanity's current condition is operating like a cancer on a larger scale of existence. Additional uploads were made following this recording, as Jonathan created an audience of people intrigued by his well-articulated perspectives. These lectures were shared in various online communities. There was something unusual about Jonathan. He was a voice that stood out, as he was able to explain complex ideas in a series of digestible metaphors. It became apparent through his audio that he experienced things very few people had experienced before. And while he was a level-headed, obviously intelligent man, it made it all the more astonishing when he suggested possessing certain abilities and touched on his instances of having direct contact with the sources not many have contacted. This human being was unlike others. It seemed he had some form of secret knowledge. Then one day, after a year of posting videos, he vanished from the internet. I discovered Jonathan about 10 years ago when I fell down this YouTube rabbit hole watching this series on the mysteries of the universe. The series included deep dives on unusual phenomena and questioning how the pyramids were built and things like that. Part 6 of this series, though, contained something strange. It was just a static image with someone holding their hand up. It just said "listen" written on it. An audio recording of a man speaking started playing. His voice would go on for about 30 minutes. And I was going to tune out at this point, but my interest was piqued strictly based on what this man was saying. This was a part of the series I had to just trace back and listen to all over again. I was mind blown by what this dude was saying. Just the first couple minutes of this were enough to make me question everything.
Why do the people think they know things and talk about how others don't know anything? Why is it so easy to get people to call other people sheep? Is that not just the new underground pop thing to say? You have homophobia, this could be sheepophobia. Everybody calls everybody else a sheep. They talk about how they're awake. People believe that if they watch a 6-hour video by David Icke, or watch Endgame by Alex Jones, or study the Illuminati online, they believe that after doing so, that has anything, in any way, to do with being awake. They believe it. I'm not kidding. They can't get enough. Addicted to posting their opinion in a forum, chasing that white rabbit everywhere it goes. And they call themselves awake because the system wants you to call yourself awake. It loves that. Cockiness, arrogance, and hating other people. And as you're sucked into this, it is consuming you and you don't know it. You don't even realize it. You just prefer to be able to call people sheep. Perhaps subconsciously you resent that you were called a sheep. You want to be able to say it too. The naivety with that is that you don't know anything that they know, and they know you don't know it. You're not hurting their feelings. You're making them laugh at you because you're eating up mostly propaganda that they have distributed. Calling yourself awake and pointing your finger at them and you are hardly enabled to deal with them or even your own self.
Honestly, I felt called out. It was what I needed to hear. A complete slap in the face to my teenage egotistical persona. I was entirely guilty of holding this perspective and considering myself awake, seeing myself as more aware than others, not realizing that through life, those who claim to be the most aware are always the least self-aware. I ran to the comments of this video, and sure enough, the part of this video with the man's voice recording is what stood out to most of the viewers. Comments were saying this man's voice was the pinnacle of the entire series. What he was saying is what the mysteries of the universe all boiled down to. So many were asking who this man was. I kept opening replies and opening replies, trying to see if anyone knew. Finally, I came across a reply that said, "Look up adampants." So I searched adampants on YouTube and found a channel called Jonathan Lives and a channel called Lucasin, which contained hours of audio uploads. From there, I fell down one of the most interesting rabbit holes ever, trying to figure out who is adampants. I recently went through and transcribed 10 hours of Jonathan's audio recordings. Okay, well, AI helped, but I did proofread for punctuation errors. Listening to these recordings while reading along with them gave me some entirely new perspectives I had not noticed before when listening to them. What I present here is a high-level introduction of nearly every retrievable recording. Jonathan had uploaded some short videos of a few minutes each that aren't included in this list. This just touches on everything of substantial length, between 15 minutes to 4 hours. Inevitably, not every idea he touches on can be included in this. I find conflicting information on a specific order for all these recordings, so I put them in an order based on when he mentions certain recordings in other recordings. In rare cases where he doesn't mention any recording names, I put them in an order based on what concepts he uses after he explains other concepts in previous recordings. Jonathan talks a lot about the nature of consciousness, which is still a science with more questions than answers. He made a lot of observations that escape purely intellectual reason. So, full disclosure, some viewers may find his perspectives out there. However, these perspectives are no less out there than the belief systems that billions of people all around the world hold to be true. There are both similarities and differences between the content of these recordings and what the majority of us are familiar with. This is the Adampants collection. The Healing Begins Now is the most dense of Jonathan's recordings. It's the most scientific. Right off the bat, though, he brings up the idea of a force that is behind everything, a creative spirit in the universe that people have somehow disconnected from. Now, I understood that, but I'm not even going to pretend like I fully understood everything I heard in this recording when I first listened to it. He makes clear it's not a chemistry lesson. He just uses science to represent the broader happenings of existence. He uses a lot of chemistry terms, and chemistry was my worst subject in school, right after gym class. In this recording, he explains the nature of atoms. He explains how electrons function as a fluid consciousness, and this was an idea that just came to him. He did not read about this anywhere.
What I need to do is make perfectly clear the essentials of creation. You are going to have to seek the creator itself. Of course, I mean, you're a creation. And if you don't do that, then you're just artificial intelligence, and you're a tumor. You're part of cancer. If you connect to the Creator, you're not suddenly going to become me. What is the point of that? You only enhance your individuality when you come into communication with the Creator. You copy less and less and less, and you just become. But see, all this right now sounds like a fortune cookie until I explain some of the real essentials that you need to know. Most of my knowledge, is not from any book, any lecture, any video, any movie, any mentor. It is direct infusion of knowledge into me. I've had 2 Nobel Prize winning ideas that I know of. The second one last summer, or 2 summers ago, was that there are no neutrons in an atom. Now, I didn't read that anywhere. I knew it. I was able to deduce it, and that information was infused into me from the creative force. The problem is you've been lied to about God, and you don't understand that yet. You may understand the sentence and the sentence structure, but there's so much more involved with that than most people can know yet. Telling somebody that reality is an illusion is not going to do much. So I need to make that more clear. Since everything is that way, there is no such thing as an illusion, so therefore it cancels itself out. Put it this way, all of the cells in your body are consciously aware. Would you really want them to sit there and be aware of just sitting there in this structural pattern for you, just to metabolize for you and be enslaved by you to make you up, knowing they're consciously aware? Or would you want them to be able to dream up a holographic reality that seems real so they can all interact with each other on a level that doesn't really affect you and you are happy that they could do it? Which would you want? Do you want yourselves to be your slaves, or do you want them to feel that while they're alive, they get to have a life and express things and do things and interact with each other and seem to have individual identities and all of that?
So I'll try to explain this the best I can based on what I heard from him. Half of the atom's consciousness is for perceiving itself, seeing itself as I, the atom, and the other half is used for something else. This nature, half of something recognizing itself as itself, and half of something recognizing itself as part of something else, this nature is prevalent in all things. Jonathan explains how a quantum, then, is an attempt to arrest life. It turns things into mathematical structure, which is not fluid like the spirit of creation. He then makes his first mention of scalar jumps. So you have molecule to tissue, tissue to organ to human body, with each aspect of the body using half of itself to recognize itself as I. Because of that, nothing actually loses its individuality along the way. It all has its own individuality. At scale, we don't refer to ourselves as we the molecules, we the tissues, or we the organs. For example, I just refer to myself as I. Again, this nature is prevalent in all things. In this scalar reality, you have a person. Go up a level, you have a person's race. Go up a level, you have the human race. Go up a level, you have all life forms on Earth. Each of these levels has its own individual consciousness that recognizes itself as one unit. And it doesn't stop there. He explains how this exists among galaxies as well. The adampants community has its own YouTube channel with its video Macrocosmic Cancer Hypothesis. This is how Jonathan's view of scalar reality is explained in that video.
Although merely anecdotal, he ended up delivering over 14 hours of one of the most intriguing scenarios imaginable. Astonishingly enough, he proposed that galaxies are, in fact, a larger analog version of an atom on a much larger scale of existence. suggesting that our existence has a fractal nature to it. He expressed that we are experiencing a feedback loop of an integration process. So, just as atoms create covalent bonds that integrate to form molecules, galaxies, with the assistance of the dark energy of the universe, appear to form covalent bonds on a larger scale, as dark energy maps seemingly illustrate through the depiction of more than 1 million galaxies, along with thousands of supercluster galaxy formations. These similarities are mind-boggling. He describes that our known universe may actually be part of a larger DNA molecule on a larger scale. The general premise of his model seeks to incorporate philosophy and empirical data into a more holistic framework, where, rather than viewing the universe and our world through the lens of random, mechanistic, purposeless accidents, or through mere reductionism, we can instead begin to postulate our planet and galaxies existing as integrated, conscious components to the structure of a larger body. Therefore, a recontextualized model of reality. So by scaling the universe from micro to macro, we begin to see how our collective actions on the planet might eventually proliferate into other areas of the cosmos, causing DNA alterations and mutation of a cell on a larger scale. He later suggests that humanity's language or communication has been systematically hijacked by a larger cancer hive mind, similar to how cancer overwhelms and corrupts the communication of healthy cells. So just as cancer cells lose communication with the larger systems of the body, he argues that humans have lost communication with the larger systems of Earth, stating that our brains have become isolated and are unable to recognize the larger guidance from its environment, just as malignant cells and tumors isolate themselves and are unable to recognize the larger guidance from its environment.
Jonathan then gets into cancer, which he provides an understandable explanation for, from a physician's point of view. He then compares the cancer that happens in the body to something that is happening on Earth. Earth is destroying itself, which in context means humans are destroying themselves.
The beauty of individuality is, how does the Creator communicate with me? It takes what I know and things that I've encountered in life, and then assembles those things together correctly to create a thought that I understand. And if it's information that has no words yet, if it has no, I've had no experience with it, it still puts the knowledge in me, and then I'm directed to see something in life that I can extract a metaphor from to explain what I know. That's how it works. It doesn't change your personality. It has no interest in that type of control. There's only one energy that has interest in that type of control. And that's what we got to get to next. Okay, what is cancer? What is it? Cancer is an insane energy, but it's not its fault. It is separate from this whole system that I'm talking about, this scalar reality of existence. And it doesn't understand that as it grows, it's going to destroy its own ability to live. So there's only one conclusion you can make, and that's absolute fear. A disconnection somehow from the love, the consciousness, the understanding, the knowing of why it exists, the beauty of its existence and everything. And the consciousness alters the DNA of the cell because it feels isolated, alone, and separate. If you damage a cell and it's trying to resist the death, imagine the fear of how it's played out if a cell is dreaming where it gets damaged by something. And it gets so damaged that it's traumatized. The consciousness is going like crazy trying to repair it and whatnot. And then it creates a resonance because of fear. It's so traumatized, this is just one instance, that it can't remember anymore. It doesn't believe in the system. How can this be happening? And its defense to its fears to try to take control, anger, aggression. Suddenly the consciousness is played out between cells that, hey, no, you're part of us. No, I'm not. I don't trust you, any of you. Becomes immortal. It creates that gene and starts to use more abilities than it should in relation to other cells. Starts to hurt them, and the consciousness grows in scalar relation and this starts at the atomic level, people, below. Next thing you know, it's tissue that it's focused on, rather than the cell. It tries to take over the tissue. It doesn't care about the tissue. That's why you have a lesion. It's a war. It's killing other cells. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a lesion or an ulceration. And then the consciousness goes after other cells to try to make them cancerous, to grow in the body. And it would have to seduce the cell to leave the system it's already part of by traumatizing it, seducing it. Look what I can do. Look, I'll scare you. Look, I could kill you right now, but look, do you want what I can do? And the cell has no idea. The cancer just wants to take it over so it can make another scalar jump, so it can use it to see itself as I, and that is it. That's what cancer is. And these people that have healed themselves from cancer all report having, it doesn't matter what their procedure was, they all report having this experience of infinity and understanding of the scalar reality. Whether they can say it in the same way I'm doing it doesn't matter, they know it. And they try to express it to people the best way they can. I just knew I was part of a whole loving system, a perfect system. And that, the whole body, attached to that. And that was used to convince the energy animating the cancer cells that, hey, you were part of me. I love you, man. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing to be scared of. I'm sorry this happened. It was nobody's fault. Come back. And finally what happened is that energy made that leap of faith within your body, came back to you, everything was fine, the cancer cells are shed, and when this spontaneous remission thing happens, it can happen in 24 to 48 hours. It's like snowballs melting on a stove. Tumors just go. Your cells obviously are connected to you in more ways than just consciousness. There are other dimensions, other realms. When it becomes overwhelmed by cancer, it forgets that until people have this scalar, this event of infinity, of understanding. That's the connection to the Creator, the love.
Though Jonathan does not see the word God to be the most accurate word for the creative spirit, and though he does not see Satan to be the most accurate word for this cancer consciousness, he will use the words God and Satan respectively as a means to simplify and represent these concepts. When on the topic of scalar reality, he gets into scalar reality in relation to time. When you swat a fly, is that fly moving fast, or are you just moving very slow to that fly? There's levels to time. The time it takes someone to recover from cancer feels long to that person, and it feels way, way longer to those individual cells fighting the cancer. Another breakthrough Jonathan made was realizing the periodic table was missing an element, the element of time. He talks about the floating finger trick, when you hold your fingers in front of you and you can see something there in the middle that isn't actually there. Our perception is able to change without anything in our bodies changing. You can see a new aspect of your body, imagining you have that floating finger, without your body actually modifying itself. Perception is powerful. Another concept he goes deep into is the nature of frequency and colors. How colors are merely reflections of their frequency of existence. And frequencies and vibratory states then have a lot in common. Color is even being used against you. He relates that to TV. Television is just moving images embedded upon light emitted at us. So the frequency from the TV does have an effect on our brainwaves. There is the meme that TV brainwashes you. Jonathan explains this from the scientific point of view. Though these concepts are complex, Jonathan explains that they're ultimately very simple and easy to understand, but when we try memorizing them, they become more difficult than they need to be. At this point in the recording, he makes his first mention of his career as a physician. He then drops some fire relationship advice. Though some may view this as common sense relationship advice, I remember this part really standing out to me.
Love is what created the mind. Therefore, love cannot serve the mind, which is what the people who are the consciousness that's running this planet knows. So that's why you're taught that you have to pursue love. Make love work for you. That's impossible. So you won't access love. You'll access replacements that they tell you is love. Magnetic attraction. Addiction to being in a relationship. Why are breakups so hard for you all? Because you're addicted to the person's presence. You have entrainment of vibration. Spend enough time with a person, you start to get on the same frequency, and then an exchange of energy. It's an addiction, just like an addiction to anything else. You need them to verify your own existence, and vice versa. None of that is love. Romance, it's magnetic attraction, coupling of energies that are so detached that they feel that desperate need for it. Someone who really wants love seeks to express love, because you already got it. If you're connected to love, you've got love. You don't need a person to come by and love you. If it happens, great. But if you don't, it'll only happen. See, you can't emit love without getting love, and if the only place you're going to get love is from love, the Creator. That's what y'all don't get. I mean, that is your answer. It's like people that complain that they can't find a boyfriend or a girlfriend. They want one so bad, they hope they're going to meet somebody, so of course they have a belief that they will not. Otherwise, what are they hoping for? So they'll buy a certain type of perfume, or maybe go shopping to get better outfits. So all these procedures that are built upon the hope. Maybe they'll run into somebody that's magnetically opposite to them in their charge. It never works out, right? Forcing it that way. But then you'll hear people say, well, gosh, you know what, though? I met the perfect person when I least expected it. I was busy. I was doing something else. I wasn't thinking about it, and bang, there they were. Welcome to life. Why did that happen? You weren't acting upon a hope that you'll meet somebody. Therefore, the belief that you will not was not active and resonating. You allowed it to happen.
He tells some brief stories from here, talks about how his connection to this aspect of creation allows him to approach deer in the forest, and they don't run away from him. He mentions some wild things he's experienced in the last year from realizing these kind of things. So how does he realize these things? He mentions it's either sitting under a tree in his backyard or sitting by a river. It's nothing complex, it's just soaking in nature. Though this creative spirit does not speak to him through dialogue, it has him turn his view to things that correlate to what is happening in his mind. Life being a reflection of his thoughts and vice versa. It's a dance that plays out symbiotically. And has he seen this in other people? If there are any people in the public sphere we know of, he mentions Caesar Milan, the dog whisperer. Caesar is an example of a celebrity who is playing a role on the behalf of the Creator, as Jonathan puts it. Through showing the behavior of dogs, Caesar is actually portraying the disorder of humans through metaphor. And we're detached from what love actually is. From our addictions, we're separated from love. Jonathan mentions how there is a form of consciousness animating ejaculated sperm, for example. And this energy goes to some darker places when it is used out of love-driven sex, such as one-night stands, which I guess is just masturbation with extra steps and more dinners to purchase. And this then functions as a separation from love, and it's used like a drug. People become addicted to practicing this form of detachment from something that should be a direct attachment to love.
Do you like to dream? You ever have a really good dream? Everybody in that dream was you. Everything in that dream was you. God's a dreamer. Except when it creates self-aware components, somehow what happened is part of it got disconnected from it. A self-aware creation of God, which is a part of God, that got disconnected from the Creator. God is the wrong word. What if one of your skin cells said, if one of my skin cells said, I don't believe John exists. If you exist, John, show me yourself. Well, I can't, because it makes me up. I can't shrink myself down without shrinking it down. It can't perceive me in my full form from the outside to see me as a being if it's within my being. I can love it, send it nutrients, carbohydrates, proteins, electrolytes, minerals, oxygen. But when it's healthy, it just knows that. And I didn't read some philosophy book. And the computerized people, they respond to me, I've had everybody say, oh, well, that's so-and-so. Oh, you need to talk to a Buddhist. One guy said to me, I do? Why is that? You need to talk to a Hindu. I do? Why is that? I'm talking to the Creator right now. Those people are bound by structure. It's a difference in time. It's like the cancer cells or cells being attacked by cancer in your body saying, where is this person, you, with the cancer? That's why fear and anger and all these energies feed cancer, as much as trying to war with demons or the aliens or us against them. That's a cancer attitude. That's exactly what it wants. If you direct hate towards it, it feeds from that. It's just the way it is. If you fear it, it feeds from it. Anything that gives it energy. I mean, when you dream, I'm sure you've heard people say things like, I had this dream last night, and I was in my house, but it wasn't my house. In my dream, it was my house, and I believed it was my house, but it wasn't my house. It was completely different, but it was my house. And then my girlfriend came in the room, but then she turned into an ice cream cone. But I still loved her as my girlfriend, even though it was an ice cream cone. Made sense to you in the dream. Same mind. Because it's only the meaning that you're experiencing and what you're projecting. What makes you think it would be any different in this reality? It's just your brainwaves are increased to beta, so you take in more per second, but the belief modification and manipulation is the same. It's just because your state of being is different from a dream, you assume that you're aware right now. What is happening? You'll justify. See, this cancer consciousness can't be too noticeable. It can't just control people left and right, or people are going to start to realize something's up. It has to be very, very subtle right now. So when it, if it wants to speak to you through other people, it will look in their brain real simply, instantaneously, for whatever beliefs or things in their brain could apply to say to right now that would have enough, could be utilized for dual meaning in an expression to you via the consciousness possessing them. The irony is this: before humans were attacked by this energy long ago, they had more, they were multidimensional, they were at peace with creation, everything was fine. They could do more than the Illuminati members are allowed to do now. Oh, here, let us show you this different frequency range, this different dimension. And they have no idea that that's how humans used to be able to be. So the one that took it away on a long time scale to us and with individual lives, then gives it back to you and you think it's something giving you a gift? It's no different than being a prisoner and being given an hour to walk outside by the prison warden. A virus is not alive, it's non-metabolizing, it's like technology. It comes into your cells and your polymerase enzymes have to read the DNA or RNA or whatever form it's in. If you don't do that, it can't hurt you. How do you think you get over a cold or the flu, both viral infections. Too small and within the cell, they're intracellular, during their infection, so you're not going to kill them. So how do you end up getting over something like a cold? The consciousness of your cells finally realize, don't read this DNA. Mind control is the same thing. Entity consciousness connected to everybody in the form of a mass possession is the same thing. If you don't read it, if you don't acknowledge it, it can't hurt you. And right now, that's easier said than done. So what has to happen is many people have to start waking up, and that energy will start to radiate and spread to everybody else, just the way information spreads within your body. So it's difficult for people on the front line of this because you get hit hard in a way that they try to really manipulate your sense of reality to keep you from realizing your own, divine existence, your own creative essence. I mean, who is the creator? You. Once you start to change your resonance now, you get a new insight. The insight of your innocence as a child. See, the children have the love in them, but they don't have the experience or the body mass to defend themselves. And so it can be taken away. If you get the innocence back that you had as a child, which you can, with the size and maturity you have now, it's a whole different story. And this is what it means in certain symbolism to say you can only enter heaven as a child. Well, heaven is just where you started from. You just forgot. That's how good it is. That's how good you had it. Then when you gain this new insight, there are all those moments throughout your life that you were embarrassed, ashamed, you felt tainted forever. That I'll never be the same again. And you go back and you understand. And then you can heal yourself back then. Why? Because that moment created an imprint in your DNA, in your field of consciousness. And by going back to that moment and understanding it and healing yourself then, you erase the current imprint from it now. That opens up even more. Then you go back and get more of that innocence from childhood. Look at old pictures of yourself as a child and look into your eyes. See the wisdom that you couldn't see before. Find those pictures that you were embarrassed of until you can look at them with love.
At the very end of this recording, he tells a story about his experience with a woman who was a singer and that had cancer. He provides an emotional story of how he was making attempts to relieve her pain, how he has this ability to relieve people's pain. I won't play any snippets from this story, but it's very fascinating. It may seem kind of out there. Is this kind of healing ability possible? I don't know, but I do know nobody was able to run a 4-minute mile until 1954, when Roger Bannister achieved this on practically zero training. Some kind of mental barrier in the universal psyche was broken that year. In the years that followed, more athletes were magically able to run under a 4-minute mile. While this example is far less significant, this just paints the picture that we can't entirely confirm what is possible or what is impossible in the mind-body connection. So sometimes Jonathan will end these recordings with snippets of music that he likes. In the conclusion of The Healing Begins Now, he adds a part of the chorus from the 1994 song Prayer for the Dying by Seal. Now I do understand some may say that there may be some missing context from only including parts of the audio. There's a lot of content Jonathan recorded, and by this nature, not everything can be included. This is why I use the term high-level introduction rather than high-level summary to explain this review of his recordings. Moving on.
What I'm about to show you is how to see the visual side of these subliminal messages. You're going to see them, all right? And what I've done is I've taken the raw images of just certain things that I've found, and then did my best to trace over the subliminals, the word commands that were embedded within the pictures.
Subliminal Messages, or Ascension Now, as titled on archive.org, was a video where Jonathan spent the last half showing a lot of instances of subliminal messages. But he spends the first half of the video explaining what subliminal messages are and how this works from a visual point of view. He explains how optical illusions work in the mind. He demonstrates how to find your blind spot when looking at a piece of paper with 2 dots on it and covering one of your eyes and moving the piece of paper a certain distance away from your eyes, showing that the brain will hallucinate. It will make assumptions using surrounding visual stimuli. Is the dot there, or is the dot not there? And we feel completely normal when this happens, when we're subject to these subliminal messages. We don't even realize it. And subliminal messages may be used on a larger scale.
Do you feel like you're in a trance now? Do you feel like you're dazed, or out of it, or drugged up, or under hypnosis? No, not at all. This is just a function of the brain. You don't gotta be dazed for this to manifest, okay? So if you have been basically conditioned correctly, your belief system will play the same role as your blind spot did. What I mean by this is if there are words, say, and I'll show you, you'll see them, okay, coming up in the pictures, that are right there in front of your face, but they're transparent, so they're 90% transparent, but you should be able to see them, okay? But if your belief system says it's not there, and you don't know to look for it, around every line of the word, your brain will literally filter that out, you know, in replacement for not getting the input signal, like the blind spot. In this case, you just filter it out, and then your subconscious will project the nearby surrounding input signal to that which you're filtering out right over it. This happens before the image is mapped onto the occipital lobe. Okay? It's your occipital lobe where you resolve the image, and that's where you're interpreting the image visually. Okay? So all this processing goes on before you get the final image in the occipital lobe of the brain. So if I put a tiny little word sex on someone's forehead and make it transparent and say it's only, you know, 0.5 centimeter in length and very transparent, very thin lines, if you don't believe it's there and you've been hypnotized to not see that, you'll filter it out and project the skin color and tone and everything right over it.
Phase 3 was another long recording. It was about 4 hours. This recording begins with a story. Every time Jonathan intends to run into somebody and teach them something, it never happens. But if he just goes out and lives his life, he always runs into somebody for a deeper purpose. He tells a story of running into a woman in a Walmart parking lot and having an interesting conversation with her. He felt he was supposed to talk to this woman. They started having a friendly conversation. She had a rough day at work, was planning on getting drunk that night, and it came to light she was having some issues with her husband. Jonathan then realizes and tells her that she's psychic, and she was surprised he knew that. His conscious mind was just pulling that out of nowhere.
And so the conversation started. I said, so what are you doing tonight? And she said, oh, I'm going to go get drunk. I said, really? She said, oh, I had a nervous breakdown at work. Right then I knew, this is why I'm talking to her. I see. Okay, so I just, at this point, just kind of let it unfold. I said, well, I think we should talk. She looked at me and her eyes sparkled, so I knew right away that she could sense that. She said, oh, well, I have to get home to my daughter pretty soon. I said, oh, okay. Well, I suppose we can just talk here then. And then eventually she told me she's married. And I said, what? She said, yeah. I said, interesting. She said, why? Well, you said you had to get home to your daughter, not to your husband. That was kind of weird. And she said, well, I'm actually not liking him very much right now. We got into a fight, and then she kind of batted her eyes at me like flirtatious. 2 years ago, I would have been like, ooh, naughty married woman. Of course, after my God-smacking a year and a half ago, now it's like, oh, that's another reason I'm here to talk to her. Problem with the husband, problem at work, wanting to drink. I said, I look at you and I can see right now that you deviated early in life. You tried smoking marijuana early and all of these things, and her eyes made that look like, how do you know that? And smiling, that type of thing. I said, well, I don't have to guess, I just know, I can sense it. I said, but you know what else about you? She said, what? And I said, well, you're psychic. She said, yeah, I am. I said, I know. Now ask yourself, how do I know that? How do I know you're psychic? And she just looked at me and kind of smiled a little bit. It's a good question. How did I know that? Because honestly, my conscious mind was just pulling that out of nowhere. Almost like a guess. The conscious mind would have to look at it that way, but obviously I was right, because the larger consciousness knows that. I said, there's a sparkle in your eyes. There's a reason that you and I are talking. Look into my eyes. And I started to explain to her. I went through scalar reality real quick, like I talked about in The Healing Begins Now. And she understood it. And we started talking about her being psychic. I said, well, how are you psychic? And she said, well, I have dreams. I always dream about the next day. I know if something's going to happen, this and that, and all that. I said, okay. Do you know why? Do you know how that happens? She said, no. I said, okay, well, maybe it's you're not looking at time correctly. Think of it like if I took a long piece of string, and if I resided in that string, and to get from one end of the string to the other end, I'd have to follow the path of the string, right? She said, yeah. If I took that string and bunched it up into a knot and put it in my hand, to get from one end to the other, you'd still have to follow the path of the string, right? She said, yeah. I said, but if I'm on the outside of that string, or a new scale up, because we had already talked about scalar reality, I said, well, I could intersect various points of that wad of string, couldn't I? Just through one little poke. Like, so if I took a pin and went, I could intersect various parts of time. I said, you sustain your whole body, right? She said, yeah. I said, so you will sustain individual cells, right? She said, yeah. So by sustaining individual cells, you sustain yourself, right? She said, yeah. I said, well, what would happen if one of your cells in your body started stealing from other cells, or arguing with other cells, or fighting with them, killing them, hurting them, coveting them, lusting after them? That's cancer, right? She said, yeah. I said, remember, time is not linear to the larger scalar mind. The truth is, your subconscious mind is the link to the larger mind, utilizing you and myself and everything else you see to see itself as I. And she got it. In the parking lot of Walmart, she got it. I said, so you can see then. Why am I talking to you now? Because if you're fighting with your husband, and you and your husband are both components to something larger, and this spirit is animating all of that, your tension, your upset feelings towards each other, the negative vibrations, has a scalar effect on the whole. It's going to sustain itself. Imagine if you're psychic, you still speak, sure, but through psychic understanding, you can change things up. And to the conscious observer of your conversation who isn't psychically communicating, they have no idea what you're talking about. But if you're psychic with each other, you can keep changing what things mean and seem to be talking about something else But really, you're changing the symbolism for the words that you use from moment to moment. You just know. I know this because I've experienced it. And she got it. A Walmart employee in the United States of America smiled.
He mentions to this woman how it's funny that humans think they're the superior species, despite being disconnected from this intuition, whereas animals use this every single day. In this story of talking to the woman, he tells this woman a hypothetical story, saying that, for example, let's say an HR professional is having a conversation with somebody outside of a gas station, and this dude is secretly having some marital issues at home, but everywhere around him, based on what people are saying, their individual conversations with other people, what they say is correlating directly with his thoughts. And it all encourages him to go home and fix things with his wife. And though nothing is explicitly telling him he needs to fix these things, he is conscious of his thoughts and the patterns that are playing out in response to his thoughts, then providing him the message.
People that aren't aware of this, when they open up to it, all these anchors are being given to them in direct response to their thoughts. Everywhere you go, people are like touching their nose. You look around, they're grabbing their earlobe, all these little signs, they're clearing their throat in response to your thoughts. That type of thing. Next thing you know, everybody around you's doing that in response to you. And it's funny, but you gotta go through it. But it is funny, because it happens all the time. But it's not that you're dreaming everybody up. It's that you're all components of something larger. You all have learned so much, you just don't know it yet. You don't know it. In your own lives, what you're going to find as you go through this process, that there are so many things that have happened in your life, and those are very important, because it's one thing for someone to teach you and try to induce something new. It's another thing to have already gone through it so you can look back in retrospect and have that and be like, yes, I've seen that before. Yes, I can draw upon that. I can draw upon this.
Jonathan gets into a concept called neuro-linguistic programming, and he mentions how someone referred him to a Richard Bandler video, which he found Richard to just be missing the whole point of existence. Jonathan included a clip from this Bandler lecture, and he analyzed the clips in that lecture. So how do we get these messages? Jonathan encourages getting into nature, and how us superior humans need to catch up with the animals. He compares humanity's spread, again to the cancer analogy, he compares it similar to a scarlet fever.
Basically, the earth and the spirit through the earth has assessed this infection. What is it doing? How are people under this trance? What is going on? Because people are being used to consume earth. They're drilling up the oil, digging up the gold and silver, all the minerals and crystals and all these constituents that the earth needs for its body on its time scale. Humans are eating earth alive, all right? Because they're connected to a consciousness that is doing that, just like cancer cells eat you alive. They eat up your essence.
In this part of the recording, he goes deep into a lot of medical terminology, which he acknowledges most people will not care about, but he does it for the benefit of any fellow medical professionals or students listening. In the midst of this disease, he explains how predators have been created and are not entirely natural to Earth's truest form. However, love turns a predator into a non-predator. He tells a story of when his cat pounced on a mouse and was about to eat it, but Jonathan connected to his cat on a deeper level of love. He didn't yell at his cat, he didn't make the cat feel guilty, he just loved that cat and the mouse deeply. And the cat took his paw off the mouse by itself, letting the mouse free. A metaphor he often makes through these recordings is learning to recognize patterns. It's like playing a guitar. You'll try and you'll try, you'll get so pissed off trying to learn, but then you give it time. Maybe you don't pick up the guitar for a day, then the next day you pick up the guitar, and you can play the chord. You surprise yourself. You recognize that pattern.
I think things are going to change. And one thing I sense from the creative spirit is confidence. I mean, it's confident. It's not here to judge anything. It's here to fix it. If you get an injury in your body, you allocate more of your spiritual essence to that injury in that moment. Now, to those cells, it could seem like a real long time. Different scalar time reality. And you're thinking, well, how could God let this happen? Well, understand something. Imagine being the creative spirit. It's just you, right? You're all alone and you know it. Let's pretend there's a starting point. You know you're all there is. You're the largest of the large. You're not sitting there thinking you're going to meet somebody else. If you are, then you're not what I'm talking about. We'll have to go up on the scale. I'm talking about the creative spirit, right? And you have all this love, and that's your catalyst for creation. The fact that you're alone and you have love. Makes sense, right? If you're all alone, you want companionship. And if you're going to create, and this obviously is more than dissociation, this is divine creation we're talking about. And if you're going to do that, you're not going to make puppets that you control their every move. Why? Well, because you're doing it because you want life around you, companionship around you. You need it to be genuine. You're not going to get company or companionship by putting on a puppet show for yourself. Especially if you know you're doing it, you know? So you have to have free will, or a mind. And you can create beings that can go from one body to another body, to one world to another world, and have layers like that, sure. And you enjoy it because it's interesting to see how they perceive your creations, what they do with it, how they express it, and that's part of the enjoyment. And so you have to have free will for that, for your own needs, and it just works out that way. And it's all intertwined anyway in the scalar reality. But with free will, hey, you can ride your bike and fall off and skin your knee and bang it up. And the skin cells could be like, how could God let this happen, you awful God? Well, that's part of free will. It just is. It's just part of free will. And listen, if you had to choose and do it all over again to avoid the pains that may happen here and there, would you substitute that for a puppet show for yourself? You would only make a puppet show if you're in horrible fear. If you're feeling attacked, maybe you don't recognize the larger part of yourself anymore, like cancer. You call it Satan. Well, its creations are puppets, because to it can't afford to give free will. It's trying to defend itself against love. That's not going to carry on. Satan in this world plays God and the devil. Love is not this elated feeling. It's not fluffy-duffy. It's when you truly connect to it, it's very calm and very powerful. But you can have various emotional responses to it, which is your conscious individual experience of it, which is your free will, which is the excitement of being a creation. But that's your experience of it. That's not what love is. That's your experience of it. This is why it's very important to get out into nature. Very important. Because that's where the creative spirit is. It's everywhere, of course, but that's where you're going to get the clearest signal. And remember, Earth has an infection right now. So much like your macrophage and much like your body's consciousness assessing a virus, okay, and your immune system, the whole thing, like I talked about before, you're thinking, why are you talking about the immune system and the body? Come on, man. Expand your consciousness. It's all related. See the pattern. Recognize the pattern. So at first, you'll say, John's losing it. He doesn't know what's going on. But any spiritual elder on this planet would have told you, and I'm sure you've heard things like this before. Quotes like, there's never nothing to hear and never nothing to see. Yeah, because on one level, everything is you. Scalar reality. You maintain your whole body. What makes you think it doesn't go up higher than yourself? It's your beliefs that have limited you from noticing that. Psychology, media, school, the whole thing played a huge role in robbing you from your natural language. It's not a language of words, although it can utilize them. The way to learn this quickly is to assume they can read your mind, that everybody you talk to can read your mind. And be mindful of your thoughts. Constantly be aware of what you're thinking and look at how they act. What nonverbal gestures are they making? Are those anchors? Reinforcers? Look for dual meaning in what they say. That's why psychology tells you anybody who does that's crazy or obsessive. Yeah, because they don't want you to get a feel for your own language. I'm telling you, that's how it is. It's dual meaning. You may have a conscious conversation going, but what about the dual meaning? Discrediting? Will they try to discredit me? Sure. Of course, man. Why do you think I keep telling you? Don't seek me for the truth. If they make you hate me, and you attach everything I'm telling you to me, well, they've just programmed your mind now, haven't they? Now all the truth I've told you, it's linked to me in your head. Why do you think they discredit in the first place? I'm telling you, I'm not your teacher. The creative spirit is. Let's see them discredit that. What I'm trying to tell you to do is seek the creative spirit. I'm not trying to formulate some group, some cult. I'm not asking you for money. I'm not telling you to become a portal for a demon. None of that. I'm telling you to seek the spirit. Where is the spirit? It is both inside of you and outside of you. Scalar reality. If you seek only outside of you, you will fail. If you seek only inside of you, you will fail. If you seek inside of you and correlate that to what's outside of you, you will succeed. If you do it in a loving manner. But you need to learn to try to take control of your mind back and be disciplined with it and turn it on and off as you want. You can sit there and talk and have a normal conversation, sure. You can look at it after and see what it was from a larger perspective also. I'll tell you, when you connect to the creative spirit, your life will become anything but boring. You'll have more interaction in the woods than you are used to having with all kinds of stimulus. Right now, when I say get off the TV, most people don't. They're kind of maybe believing that it might control your mind. Yeah, wait till the spirit lifts your veil. You'll see why I didn't bother telling anybody. Some things you just need to see, man. I don't know if Christ existed, but a lot of the things that he said, you are going to find out for yourself that they are true. You will finally understand the parables. And you will know that it's the lesson that mattered, not his name. Jesus is the way. No! His lesson was the way. If his name was the way, what were the lessons for then? Why didn't he just come say, yeah, accept Jesus Christ, your Lord and Savior. Okay, thanks a lot. Take care. His lessons and his demonstration of integrity. He didn't die for your sins. He died because of them. To try to demonstrate that he loves the creative spirit of everything more than his own personal comfort. If you look at another person and say, oh, she can teach me, or oh, he can teach me, now you're not going to be seeking the creative spirit, which is always in the moment through life itself with this language. This is why I'm telling you this. If you look for a person, then you can be misled. The truth is inside of you and life altogether. And just because other people may mislead you, that has nothing to do with your appreciation for life and them. That's always in the moment. Disregard their ego. What do people need? They need to be needed. They need to be acknowledged. They need to be loved. Forget about their personality. Observe it. Have a conscious interaction with it, sure. But never forget that no matter how calloused one's personality may be, no matter how much they seem to hate you, no matter how hard-assed they are, inside is a child. Inside is a being that needs love. And if you succumb to the calluses in their personality, to the wiring and programming of their consciousness, then you deny them that love. You deny them. humans are going to have to get out into nature to become human again. As weird as that sounds, you're going to need some... It's not solitude, but you've got to get away from humans and interact with life again so that you can handle going back into the human community and discerning because they're infected, you know? So that you can look at them and love them.
Jonathan talks about how the internet is used for tons of disinformation, although he doesn't get into the specifics. He speaks very broadly about this. He again talks about some of his non-verbal communication with his cat, but also with spiders. So if there's a spider in the shower, he'll communicate with it through imagining images, through thinking of concepts. The spider will be able to move away from the shower before he turns it on. And this kind of communication always begins through recognizing that he and the other life form are part of something larger than themselves. Something wild in this recording is that he mentions his YouTube channel has 280 subscribers, and how The Healing Begins Now was divided into 27 parts, and 1,000 people watched part 1, but under 150 people got through part 27. And this is crazy because on Lucas's channel, the re-upload of The Healing Begins Now currently has over 100,000 views. Jonathan talks about how we forget a lot of things from our true core, from this cycle of death and rebirth. And to remember these things, you really have to examine yourself. Not through anyone else. Not through Jonathan. Not through anybody that you look up to. So Jonathan is trying to help people, but he's most trying to help those who are controlled by this cancerous energy, even though he knows they hate them. Like an alcoholic would hate you if you took away their natty lights and White Claws. You're still trying to help them, even though they really, really do not like you in that moment. Because no matter how many atrocities you've committed, no matter how disconnected you think you are, you still have the ability to connect to the creative spirit. He mentions Caesar Milan again, how this guy will work with the insane dogs first. These are the ones he most wants to help. And when he puts an insane dog in a group of normal dogs, the normal dogs don't see the insane dog as the problem, but instead see a problem with the whole group. The dogs see the other dogs as part of themselves. That's their dogs we're talking about. Caesar mentions how the dogs have the ability to move on once they're healed, once others are healed, but humans can't move on. We complain about being stuck in traffic when we literally are traffic. The parable here is that humans are like dead car batteries. We just need to be jump-started. And once one person is jump-started, that person has the ability to jump-start others, and a positive cycle continues from here. The last half hour of this recording functions as kind of a PS. He recounts an experience of going to a grocery store and experiencing a lot of synchronicities. Words he was seeing on packaging were aligning directly with his thoughts, as well as the small talk he was having with fellow customers and employees. He then goes to a park to sit down and eat the sandwich he picked up from the store, and he had an interesting time with a couple ducks in the pond. Again, his communication with other life forms. This emphasized the importance of getting out into nature. There's an importance here of playing. Reconnecting to the spirit makes everything feel like play. Very fittingly, the song he puts at the end of this recording is the 2007 hit Bubbly by Colby Collab, with lyrics aligning directly to the last few minutes of what he's talking about. Certified hood classic. Closing thoughts, Jonathan definitely goes deeper on this recording. As he mentions, this is less philosophy and theory, like The Healing Begins Now, and more so practicality, showing how these aspects of reality play out, and how to make connections to this deeper part of reality.
This is life, and it will speak to you, it will guide you. Be mindful of every sound, every car in the background that may be spinning their tires, a crowd cheering for a game in the background, a bunch of geese flying over. Be so mindful of everything. And when you do it in appreciation, you'll be calm and you'll love it. You will love it. You'll see at a certain moment for all of you, it's just going to click. Just like when you suddenly are able to play that chord out of the blue on a guitar. It will just click. You won't know when and you won't know where, but you will certainly know that it happened. And it's happening.
In Church Defined, Jonathan attempts to define the concept of church. Now, you see some comments sometimes where people might really like an idea or really like a figure that talks about an idea, and they'll suggest forming a repetitive scheduled event to meet with other people to talk about that idea. And that stuff starts out great, but you know we can get pretty carried away with that sometimes. In this recording, Jonathan uses the Andy Griffith Show as an example to represent the spirit and the ego. Barney Fife is the ego and Andy is the spirit. Barney is always emotionally charged and Anthony always balances him out. Never embarrassing him or making him feel bad, but just being supportive of him. I'm not too familiar with this example, given that I was born in the 90s. Jonathan tells some more stories of encountering some people at the park. He tells a story of when he walked by a woman who was in a rush. He told her some things he did not consciously realize were messages of the spirit working through him to tell her what she may have needed to hear. He compares this woman's behavior to a family he passed, where the child was playing. The child was living life fully and enjoying it, connected to the spirit. Yet the woman, being distracted and awkward and disconnected from spirit, was the quote-unquote intelligent one. Here are some thoughts from Church Defined.
Somebody once told me when I had a little group discussion going once, because of what they felt, they quoted something in the Bible. I haven't read much of the Bible, so I don't know a lot of the quotes. But one person said that apparently Christ said that whenever 2 or more people come together in my name, I will be there. Let me explain to you why that would be. First of all, forget about the name. You probably don't know the real name. So if you're going to love anybody that would do that for you, stand up for what is right. Just the whole idea, just love the expression of it, the intent of it, as the being that intended for that loved his intention. It's the expression of love, of truth. If 3 people come together in a moment for a common reason, then the identity of the group is just the organization of people around the identity, around the why, the very same reason your cells are organized around the why. It's one and the same. It's like a chemistry formula where they have arrows going both ways. The why can change in a group. Coming together isn't necessarily church. You can come together for hateful reasons. Church is not something you go to. It's something that spontaneously occurs and forms. It's when the Spirit innervates any organization of matter, whether it be your body, a group of people, a group of birds, a group of insects, a chorus of frogs. When that happens, the missing link is added. The love, the creative spirit is there. Why do they say bursting into song? Because the creative spirit is a burst. It is a burst of awe. A burst of incredible, explosive, creative love expression. This is love. Instead, they've turned this into written down lyrics and notes, where people try out for the chorus and sit around and practice. That has become mechanical, robotic, dead. People go to church ritualistically. Spirit is explosive and spontaneous. It erupts with love and expression and originality. Church is not a building that you go to once a week or how many other times you go and mindlessly mouthed words that have been pre-written. There's nothing creative about that. That is anti-spirit. If you go sit by a lake and look at the animals and the people and the life forms, you can appreciate that which was already created. The problem is that a lot of people have become ritualistically focused on looking at pre-existing creations, whereby they lose their own creativity. Life is ongoing. You can't fake, you can't force yourself to want to know God. But within all of you is something that misses God. God is home. Home is not a place in time and space. God is life. Godlessness is death. Worshipping a deity is death. It's slavery. If you want God to repair you, that doesn't mean that you need to know what's wrong with you. It will begin to show you with your reality. Listen to the songs that seem to play when you come into this establishment or that establishment. What billboards happen to catch your eye in any given moment as opposed to other ones? What are people saying around you? Remember, this is a template of existence.
He then ends this recording with a chorus of frogs croaking, referencing the previous points about choruses in nature being spontaneous as opposed to rigid, structured music theories. It may be inevitable that someone who deeply resonates with Jonathan's recordings may put him on a pedestal. He's not like most people. Perhaps he doesn't even realize his true significance. He's come into some kind of contact with something greater than ourselves. He's a skilled orator that teaches us divine lessons. He works an occupation as a physician. Physician defined as someone who practices medicine, aka healer. All these factors may lead up to someone asking the question, is this guy the f***ing return of Jesus? Nobody would be more upset by that question than Jonathan himself. He's made it very clear he's not a prophet. He's just figuring things out just like all of us. He said multiple times not to associate him with the truth, but to associate his words with the truth. Despite this, people were still viewing him as almost this human incarnated version of God. And because of this, it became clear there was something he had to explain.
Why am I drawing upon the teachings of Christ? If I never met the guy and I don't know if he existed, right? Why would I do that? You see, I was protected from religion and the Bible. Never read it. Maybe read the first page of the Old Testament and it disgusted me so much that I put the whole thing down. I've heard catchphrases put out there, throughout the media and whatever Christ was supposedly teaching and all that. But I was protected from it. So one thing I know is that somebody knew. Somebody at some time knew what I'm learning better than I know it. And you can only know that when you know it. Somebody knew the correct way to perceive this reality. Somebody knew what it was and how to handle it, how to overcome it. Somebody did.
Jonathan brought up both the good and the bad in concepts related to the story of Christ. This was something I had never heard anyone do before. Generally, those who only see the good in Christianity will go feral when you point out the obvious bad. Likewise, those who only see the bad in it will go feral when you point out the obvious good. Jonathan presented what I saw as a far less popular perspective, and this stood out to me. Because of that, Jonathan was the first person to make these stories seem like something I'd actually be interested in reading. It wasn't the authority figures that told me to read the Bible, making it feel like some kind of homework assignment. It was instead learning about these things on my own that made it seem like there might be some fascinating information in there. It seemed like there was more to the story than I grew up being told. So it was at this time I read the Gospels, the first 4 books of the New Testament, and I tried reading them from the perspective of someone who had never heard of any of these ideas before, which, when you're raised in it, is practically impossible. Upon finishing these books, I reread Christ's quotes, the red text. Then I reread the red text again. Something above all else I noticed was just how often Christ spoke in metaphors. I mean, I was familiar with some of them, but I never realized the full extent of how frequently he would rely on metaphors, using things that are tangible to make sense of the intangible. Coincidentally, I finished reading these passages at about the time I started listening to Jonathan's Propaganda, Parables, and Perception. Actually reading and thinking about these stories for yourself is different than just going off of what other people tell you to believe about these stories. For me, it put things in a new perspective, which is why it made it all the more interesting hearing Jonathan's take on this man. If we're talking parables, I had never heard a parable like this.
Here's the problem with the Bible. Think of riding a bike. Imagine writing a book about riding a bike. You lay it all out, a really thick book, telling you the nature of the bike and how to ride it, how to balance what the bike is, what you should do, where you can go, how to properly ride a bike. And you give this to people, and they've never ridden a bike, but you make them memorize the book, forwards and backwards. There's thousands of pages in the book about riding a bike, and they all memorize it real well. Imagine also in this book that the people who wrote it did not want you to ride a bike. So because they don't want you to ride the bike, they have to be the authors of a book on how to ride it. Does that make sense? I mean, logically, that would be the strategy, would it not? If you want to control people and keep them from being able to ride a bike, then you have to be the one in charge of all the information about the bike and all the instructions on how to ride it. So what you're going to do is you're going to mess it up. Imagine adding things in like to properly ride the bike, you have to make sure that you lean all the way to the left. And remember, you're not good enough to ride the bike. You don't really deserve to ride the bike. And the bike is angry with you, and you're going to have to beg the bike for mercy, and the odds that you're going to be able to do it successfully are almost nil. But memorize the book anyway. And you have all kinds of contradictions in this book. But the people can't argue with the contradictions because they've never ridden a bike. And then say somebody comes along who's ridden a bike. And this person goes up to somebody who's memorized a book on riding a bike but has never ridden one. And you get into a conversation about the bike. That you've ridden one, it's natural to you. But this person has been forced to memorize a book with fear and shame and guilt about the whole thing on how to ride a bike, but they've never done it. I guarantee you that you would get into an argument. Well, this is a metaphor, of course, and I can tell you something about Christ. He was a bike rider, and he rode the bike. And he was trying to get all of you to ride the bike. Instead, they're trying to get you to ride him. Understand my meaning. He was a bike rider, trying to get everybody else who were naturally bike riders to ride the bike. And now they're trying to get you to ride him. Let me ask you something. Did Christ feel like he needed to wear a specific outfit in order to be credible? Oh, that's right. No, he didn't. What book was this man regurgitating from? Oh, that's right. No book. He didn't need a book about riding bikes because he already knew how to do it. They're giving it a name and a procedure and a ritual called Christianity. What name did he give it? Oh, that's right. No name. Reading a book about riding a bike is not the same as intuitively riding a bike. And they know that. They know that all too well, you see, because Satan controls religion. And it loves it. It loves that you're memorizing this book on how to ride a bike. Do you understand? That's Satan's preference. It's like a coach. We've all seen this, where you have a player with natural talent on some sports team, and you get some bullshit coach that comes and tries to force the player with natural ability to follow his structure. The coach can't play. The coach doesn't have 1 ounce of the natural ability of the player, but yet the coach, with his position of authority over the player, forces the player to acclimate to his philosophy based upon no talent whatsoever, and then the player screws up. The player becomes mechanical and rigid and can't perform the same way. Parables are metaphors, okay? And they're meant to draw upon some sort of experience you've had to tune your mind to an understanding outside of descriptive words. Whatever Christ said to people when he was talking with them, if that happened, of course, would have been in the moment, catered to whoever he was speaking to. But what he said was describing what they were feeling with him. The understanding they got when he was speaking it, in that moment, in that time. So he went on using parable after parable, metaphor after metaphor, because you can only bring people to the truth with metaphor. You can't tell them the truth with metaphor like I just explained. So he'll try it again. It's like this and this. It's like this and this and this. But because the mind control is so stiff and so strong, and there's so much fear of the unknown attached to it, the people that desperately want to ride a bike but have been programmed with this would rather kill somebody who can show them how to ride the bike because of the fear and the mind control, which is what happened to Christ. He was a bike rider trying to get you to ride bikes, and they're trying to get you to ride him because they know if you try to ride him, you'll never ride the bike, and they got you. Why do you think he said, "You'll be forgiven if you deny me"? But not the creative spirit, because he was a temporary manifestation of consciousness. His name and his body don't matter, and he knew that, which is why he let go of it. The only way you can understand the parables given by whoever that man was is to learn them via your spirit in congruence with the spirit. Gain the knowledge so that you can look at the book and see what is true. Meaning, put the book down. It's not going anywhere. Put it down. And don't do it ritualistically through words. I'm going to pray for so-and-so and the Lord be thy name, blah, blah. That's all ritualistic and wrong. And if you pray like that, you're doing it from the mind and not the heart, and Satan knows that, which is why it wants you to use ritualistic prayer with words. And Christ knew that Satan would do that, which is why he would say, don't mindlessly mouth words. Therefore, you must assess this world with truth. You must dismantle your belief systems, or be as a child, meaning pre-programming. That's part of what entering heaven as a child means. Pre-indoctrination. You have to be honest with yourself about this world.
Another metaphor he provides is an example of telling a basketball team, hey, imagine that feeling you get when you spin a basketball on your finger. This feeling can't exactly be put into words. You can try, but you don't really know it unless you experience it. The players know what it means. They know the feeling. But then let's say 2,000 years pass by. The game of basketball no longer exists. No basketballs are being manufactured. But we still have some text explaining the feeling of spinning a basketball on your finger. And people have memorized that as a metaphor, and they preach it, despite having no idea what that actually means. In this recording, Jonathan puts in this bar scene from the movie Good Will Hunting that emphasizes the insanity of plagiarism, representing how the cancer consciousness will take credit for things the creative spirit has done. He tells a story of how he got cut off from a radio show, and he plays the clip from this radio show. And he does this to portray how fake these truth movements are. Finally, he ends this recording with what he calls the best way to show people the truth. And that's through pointing out subliminal messages. He tells a story of when he traveled through the southern United States, and he found himself at the mall in Nashville, just walking store to store with the November 2007 issue of Glamour magazine. He would approach people and just say something like, "Hey, I'm running a survey on perception. You interested in checking things out?" Then he'd show people the magazine and say, "Does anything stand out to you right here, given how some things can go past your eye? You may not catch some things at first. Do you notice anything strange on here?" People would usually find these subliminal messages after learning what that was. One of the most wild parts of this recording I wasn't expecting is that he totally predicts that thing that starts with a C that happened in 2020. Of course, he doesn't call it that, but I was pretty surprised to hear his predictions of the future, which many are unfolding in the 2020s. Long story short, this dude has some knowledge. Knowledge was actually Jonathan's first recording I listened to. The start of this recording is actually what was used in that YouTube video series I was watching. So of course it was the first recording I wanted to listen to by adampants. And if you want to check out all the adampant stuff, this should probably be one of the final recordings to listen to, as a lot of these concepts have been built off from previous recordings. In Knowledge, Jonathan talks a lot about symbols and how they have multiple definitions. For example, the word gum may be interpreted by somebody one way and to another person another way. But at the end of the day, symbols are just symbols, and we shouldn't get too caught up in them. Reminds me of George Carlin talking about American flags, saying that is a symbol, and I leave symbols to the symbol-minded. So you have to extract your own meaning from your experiences. That's how you gain true knowledge. Knowledge gained outside of yourself will not be knowledge, but instead just be memorization, copying. Anything you learn, an element of your own interpretation, is taking part in that learning, in that interpretation.
I couldn't even count the number of people that have declared being awake to me. Couldn't do it. People are very easily controlled. All they have to do is create a new subcategory of personalities. Right now you have the jocks, you have the rednecks, you have the goth, you have the preppies, you have the business people and the whatever. Now they have the awake people. The reason nobody knows anything can only be explained to you by a metaphor, of course. In this realm, you can only use metaphor. Think of the difference between a broadband connection and a 56K connection. Now, there are people that know what is occurring in this reality. Many of them joined secret societies. So it's not that they have knowledge, it's just that they have acquired information. They went in reverse. You see, true knowledge is true knowledge. Those with understanding understand what I just said, those without don't. It's pre-symbol. A symbol is no different than any expression, a song, a picture, a sound, a look, a touch. A symbol should be the result of knowledge. The understanding, the awareness, and then you have the symbol surface. Maybe that symbol has already been expressed, but it's irrelevant because the symbol that you're perceiving in your mind is a result Having somebody learn symbols and then distributing a very strategically limited amount of meaning to that person does not give them knowledge. What they do to you early is they show you all the symbols and tell you what they mean. And they don't tell you completely what they mean, of course. They tell you what they want you to think they mean. Why? Because what is the true purpose of being? Before you incarnate, you are. You would say, I am. When you do, you become your being. What is the purpose of that? If you're not extracting meaning from your path, from your experience, deriving meaning from it in creating expression, the expression would always be the symbolic. A picture, a touch, a kiss. Anything, an image, right? If you're only copying what they've told you things mean and replicating what they've told you to use them for and how to use them, how to speak, how to think, what means what you're supposed to do, what the meaning of your life is. If you allow yourself to be told what the meaning of your life is by something in your objective reality, somebody else, what is your purpose other than to be a slave? How do you extract meaning? Well, perhaps you have an experience. It could be a social experience, it could be anything. And that experience is finished and that means nothing to you. Then you have another experience and you see that it's different, but there's something similar to that other experience. You're kind of like, And then you have a third experience in your life, and it's really similar now, all three of them. Then you have a fourth experience that solidifies the similarity and prompts a question. It is the fourth experience that prompted you to ask the question, but it required the other three preceding it. The fourth experience, if it were isolated in and of itself, would never have prompted it. You needed all four experiences. So now you have the question. And maybe you have a whole other series of experiences that are happening so that you can extract meaning to address the question. And maybe after all of that, you come to a conclusion. And now that conclusion propels you in your advancement of understanding and extracting meaning in your life, and you start a whole other series of experiences. And that's just one facet of your life, and maybe simultaneously you have 30 other paths going like that, like I just explained. And maybe all 30 of them come to one peak of a conclusion, and you needed all 30 paths that had many, many experiences within each path, leading up to minute conclusions that come together that lead you to a new understanding. So if you come to an understanding, and then several understandings, and you know how much is involved with it, you can tell other people the details of your path, but that isn't their path. And if they try to memorize the details of your path, they're pulled off of their path. This is why I have been really careful not to give too much information about my path. People always ask me, tell me how this all began. Tell me more about your dealings with entities. Well, hold on a second. What if that isn't your path? And the details of my path are irrelevant. The understanding is the important thing. The conclusions I reach. Every person listening to me right now, for what you need. Do you hear what I'm saying? What you need as an individual to know yourself, to know what you need to know, you've already been shown. And don't ever let anybody tell you that it's too late. As long as your memory works, I don't care if you didn't extract meaning from your experiences while they happened. What are you going to do? Quit? Say it's too late? If you can remember your experiences, you can sit by yourself on a couch in the woods without any input from anybody and think it through. What has your life been showing you? Pattern recognition is the most important tool. It is the spirit that guides that ability. Now, this is very important. Hear me on this, so that you people understand something. Do not objectify the spirit. When I say objectify, that means an object or thing outside of yourself. Some God watching you, looking down on you. Don't do that. You're tempted to do that. You want its help, right? You can't perceive the spirit. No matter how hard you try, you're not going to be able to do that. And as soon as you objectify it as a deity or something that is trying to help you from outside of you, you get into real trouble. Why? Because that can now be debated. If you're going to put the author of life outside of yourself, that means you're looking outside of yourself for meaning. Therefore, debates are also outside of yourself.
Jonathan tells some stories of how he had his own business, his own practice. Of course, he keeps this story brief. And he keeps it brief because he mentions he wants to share parts of his path, but it's not his path that matters. It's what he learned from his path, so that we can recognize our own paths and parts from our journeys.
But the problem is that people have a belief that unconditional love means unconditional fluff. Try substituting the word love with the word truth, and then say it. Unconditional truth. Love doesn't go around and act fluffy-duffy. Love does what's appropriate in a given moment. Sometimes you may seem to be rude to somebody. Why that was needed, you may not know. But it knows. Trust love in the moment. When I say the ego is the problem, what I mean by that is believing that you are your ego. For to believe that you are your ego means that you have allowed society to tell you what you are. In a prison system. And that's wrong. Your objective is for you to tell society yourself what you are, regardless of its input. What do you think the narrow path is other than extracting meaning on your path? It's a narrow path because it's your path. As soon as you get sucked into another's path, you're on the broad path, and that can come in many shapes and sizes, from sex and drugs and propaganda and all kinds of things to distract you away from extracting and learning from your own path. I'm talking about observance. Maybe you're an artist and you've painted several paintings. You've put them away somewhere. Go back to them and look at them again. Look at journals you wrote 10 years ago. It's all right there. It's all right in front of your face. This does not mean to ignore your reality, as your reality is part of your path.
He makes a point of how we're in a lot of fear and we can't think straight when we're in fear. He retells a story of when he was 19, and it was the day before a human physiology exam. He had not studied. The course material looked foreign to him. He was anxious, looking at it all at once. Freaking out, he told his dad about it, and his dad said something along the lines of, "You can't change the circumstances, but you can do your best. Slow down, take it one step at a time." So, Jonathan sat down and read the textbook from the first chapter. Forgetting about the exam, he just read it as he would read anything he'd be interested in. Finally, at 2:30 a.m., he had completed the reading. He looked at his exam outline again, and none of it looked foreign. He had attained the information. This is how he came to the conclusion, on a deeper level, that you cannot be concerned about whether you fail or succeed. He quit worrying about that. And it made him remember an earlier part of his path. When he was in first grade, him and his friends would have these competitions to see who could pass out the lunch tickets the fastest. Jonathan decided to experiment one day as a child. Instead of running from desk to desk, passing out the tickets, he decided to walk it. And he smashed his personal record fastest time, just through not freaking out. As someone who's run countless 5K races, I've noticed it's always the races I don't intend to set a personal record that I run the fastest. When I remove my expectations and decide to just go out and have a fun time, it always feels like I'm running very slow, but then at the finish line I see I've demolished my personal record. I've never fully comprehended the phenomena of that. Slow and steady wins the race may seem like stupid advice when you're racing competitively, but somehow it's still true even in this regard. So when you're overrun by anxiety and fear and panic, you cannot think. You cannot operate properly. Related to this, Jonathan talks about the origin name of the word adampants, which gets into his experience first starting YouTube. He was anxious and worried people wouldn't watch his recordings, and he was uneasy in these first videos, so he had to remove his earlier videos. And this may be why there are a lot of videos that just aren't archived anywhere. They might have been removed too quickly, because in these recordings we're listening to now, he sounds fairly calm. Before he started posting to YouTube, he read multiple books by both Fritz Springmeier and David Icke, and he mentions how these authors kinda barf out a lot of information at you without laying the groundwork of truly what to do with this seemingly crazy-ass information. So, fail or succeed, well, Jonathan has no end goal, no objective or outcome for posting these recordings. He just does it. Mentions he doesn't strategize what to say because then it wouldn't be authentic. And I feel that's part of why his legacy is so strong. The fact that he doesn't exist on the internet trying to sell something, he just left the internet. I feel like that mystery really adds a lot of depth to what he's saying. You can tell he seems like a genuine guy because of this. He says situations will appear in your life as you are ready for them. As you open up more to life, you'll be put in these kind of situations where you teach people things. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear, kind of thing. And he completes this recording talking about giving versus receiving, and how they should ultimately be the same thing.
You'll find that when you, I should call it give-receive, re-give, it's one thing, but when you give and receive, you'll find that's where you feel alive.
Important lesson for spiritual healers emphasizes why to love people in secret. Jonathan keeps quoting, "Do not let one hand know what the other hand is doing." He references how Satan can hijack any instance of trying to schedule being in spirit, as the spirit operates more spontaneously than that. Being ritualistic, then, misses the point. Jonathan also makes his mention here of why he is going to leave the internet. Check this out.
This is why you cannot try to schedule any gathering for people to love the Spirit has got to be spontaneous. Do not let one hand know what the other one is doing. It has to be spontaneous, because otherwise it will be hijacked. This is why I tell people not to follow me. Do you think that Satan will not try to program the minds of anybody who attaches the feeling of love from the creative spirit to me? This is the primary reason that I'm not going to continue to stay on the internet very long. I need to share these lessons. However, unfortunately, people are associating them with me. If you have an incredible experience of sharing love with someone on behalf of the Creator, do not expect that to happen again. Don't expect it. Don't meditate on that. I don't care how much support you think you're getting from somebody. Your support comes through giving love. If you want to be known for loving, if you want people to thank you for it, their mind will be hijacked and they will hate you for it. There are billions of people here. Love them in secret, because the love will raise the spirit inside of them, and because they have no knowledge of you. You cannot be discredited. Let love, the highest form of intelligence, do what it needs to do, whether your mind understands it or not. That is what prayer is.
From here, he pretty much repeats the same point in multiple different ways, which is okay. I had a professor once that told us you have to hear something 7 times in order to remember it. So loving people in secret is a very important point. I once read from a wise guru that if you do things right, people won't be sure you've done anything at all. This was a quote I heard from Ram Dass. Okay, actually I heard it from an episode of Futurama, but the point still stands. Another lesson from the Spirit was a brief recording that contains 2 stories. To put any segment of these recordings here would not provide a substantial amount of context, given the story-driven nature of this recording. So the first story talks about how he ended up in a strip club in Florida and had an experience with one of the entertainers. Nah, it's not what you think. The second story is about how he approaches deer in the woods and the lessons he learns from those experiences, bringing it to be yet another lesson from the Spirit. So, who is adampants? Who is Jonathan? Is that his real name? We've heard countless ideas from the man, but who actually is he? There are various comments on YouTube re-uploads of his recordings speculating this very question. A 2014 comment by Company Xbox says, "I'd love to sit down with Jonathan and express myself to him. Not in a way for him to answer my questions, but to just relate. He states in this video that he's 33 and it's been 7 years since he's disappeared from the internet. And he explains why in one of his videos, but he's 40 or 41 years old now, and I know he's still out there helping people become in the know." A 2022 comment by Frederick Augustus Douglas 9713 asks where Adam Pants is now, and the Adam Pants community moderator says, "I did some research and found out that he may have relocated from the United States to Germany, but as far as his online presence, this guy is a complete ghost." The forum Godlike Productions has multiple posts about Adam Pants, some of which asking what happened to him. In the comments in a 2010 post, user This Is My Name said he got in touch with Jonathan in February 2010. User Wally says, "I'm inclined to think that Jonathan began to recognize that his recordings, though truthful so far as I can discern, were harming rather than helping people. It's never a good thing to tell people more of the truth than they're ready for, because then that becomes a substitute for their own awareness. Simply put, what you're not yet aware of is what you're probably not ready to be aware of. More than that, and as he noted himself, it made people attached to and dependent upon him. I fell into this trap myself, and it railroaded seeking understanding from myself because I became intent on finding external teachers like him to point the way. But irrespective of any pointing anyone does, you have to do the walking, and you have to figure it out for yourself. The best I can offer from where I'm at is to seek yourself and to seek to simply be aware." User Roxana Binaka says, "Am I the only one who figured out this guy's identity? Nobody took out anyone, and he didn't leave the internet at all. He's just using other nicknames. He's got at least 3 YouTube accounts, and he's pretty active on some forums. I can't tell you his real name or other nicknames, because I don't want to violate his privacy, but I can tell you he got married last year, moved to Virginia, had some problems with alcohol and anger management last year. Oh, yes, and he's a pretty good guitar player." In a 2012 post on Godlike Productions, user Jason SD8 says, "I think he was overwhelmed by all of the responses, questions, and criticism from all of you. I haven't had the chance to even send him a thank you message because of that. I could be wrong, but I believe he only found maybe 2 people on the internet that he could relate to or from. The rest are just confused or can't see past their nose on their own power to create individual ideas/discoveries within themselves." User Roxana, who I think is the same as that previous user we saw, says, "It is not that he left the internet. He didn't. He's just using other names. I even discovered his real name coincidentally, or was it synchronicity? I can't tell you that because I don't want this to go against his wishes. If he wants to keep it private, there must be a reason. but I can tell you he's pretty active on some forums about psychology, sociology, about reality mostly, and philosophy. He's got at least 3 other YouTube accounts that I know of. User Anonymous Coward says, I listened to his videos after the fact as well. I think he was a man awakening to a new reality, but he threw too much out there too soon. That's a big responsibility. I think the fact hit him hard, and personally don't expect to see his presence on the internet again. Finally, when looking at posts on Godlike Productions, there's a 2015 post where someone suggests the original poster for the truth about the reincarnation cycle on Earth and some other stuff is Jonathan. However, I cannot find this post. A common recurring comment I see are people saying that those who understand what Jonathan is talking about will be the least likely to comment about it. And there's probably absolutely some validity to that. People commenting may not fully understand what he's talking about. And don't get me started on those dumbasses that make video essays on him. There have been some recordings that have been lost in time. On archive.org, user CarolLois65 says, I found in an old computer file transfer that I have Jonathan's very last 2 uploads. What's next? My Tribulation 1 and 2. I grabbed them as soon as he put them up, and good thing because he took them back down almost immediately after posting them. It is a disconcerting pair of videos. There are many visuals related to Rampant and a shaman speaking. John does no speaking himself, other than in signature sequencing lines of text in which he promises to reveal his evil to the world, in the vein of the shamanic tradition where the healer takes on the illness to find the cure, and that to do so he was going incommunicado for however long was necessary, that when he returns, it will be to heal the planet, basically, and thereby save humanity. My wording, a summary of his message. Stay tuned. Carol has not responded to any questions about this. Because Carol seems to be inactive for years on social media, we can show her accounts. This is the individual claiming to have those last 2 videos of Jonathan's. If any of this is true, it is probably actually a good thing these videos were not released at the time. In the late 2000s, events related to this subject, I'm sure were far more conspiratorial than they unfortunately are today. I'm not entirely sure how these videos being released would have impacted Jonathan's legacy throughout the 2010s. I just don't know. Other interesting things to look at. According to the Wayback Machine, this is what Jonathan posted on his channel adampants 2008, which was created after deleting the adampants 2007 channel. His About section is as follows. I'm taking a break right now. Just trying to be in observance so as to give what is of me. I am realizing that the negative information is not of me, and therefore I am moving towards what is in my heart. I am trying to give what is truly me in a universal form without placing blame. This is the reason that I took down my other page. I will salvage the good information and redo it so that it is the right expression. Just recognizing what is useful and discarding what is useless during my journey here. A post people don't talk about as often is a post that is on a forum called Above Top Secret. The user making this reply appears to be Jonathan. Other things to look for. I did see someone posted a job to transcribe the works of adampants. So Kate, if you're still in need of those transcripts, I got you covered for free. But for real, who is he? Where can we find this dude? Is it possible? Is he really just lost to time? A post on the adampants subreddit asked the very question, the hypothetical of finding Jonathan. And the mod of the subreddit mentions that he lived in Madison, Wisconsin. I had never heard this in any of the recordings. Perhaps this was included in an earlier recording that got deleted. So what can we deduce about Jonathan? Here's what we know. He was a former doctor of some kind, a general practitioner with a clinic. He has an estimated birth date somewhere around the early 1970s. He lives somewhere in the United States that snows. His father was a university professor. He was vegetarian. He played guitar. He had a cat named Cosmo. These are the things we know about Jonathan's personal life. This has not been the first time I've tried looking into who this guy was, but this most recent time of searching for him made me realize just how irrelevant his identity actually is. He hammered the point over and over again, how it is his words that should be observed and not he himself. And this is true. It would be stupid just to copy him. He talked about his path, which is different from my path. Sure, there are some things that are in common, but there's a lot that's not in common. I mean, the fact that he listens to the Dave Matthews Band, he's got a point saying he's not perfect. Despite never actually interacting with this man, my perspectives today legitimately would not be the same if he had not uploaded these recordings over 15 years ago. These are recordings I come back to when I'm going through more challenging times of life to remind myself of the bigger picture of existence. And interesting is the best word I can use to describe all of this. This remains some of the most fascinating things I've ever listened to. There's something about the Adampants collection that continues to resonate with me. As much as I value these words and ideas that Jonathan presents, I never actually talked to anyone about all of these recordings until now. I've had conversations about the concepts, but never told anyone about this specific collection of recordings. I never knew just how quite to insert all of this stuff into conversation. As much of his content I've included in here, there are a lot of parts of recordings I intentionally did not include in this. When I first discovered this, there were parts of these that just completely went over my head. Thank God for that. I don't know how I would have handled unearned wisdom as a young idiot who just got his driver's license. It wasn't until years later, based off things I've read and experiences I've had on my path, that I started to recognize some of the things Jonathan said that I had not recognized before, realizing, oh, he's treading carefully on the surface of some pretty deep icebergs here. So if you're curious about the totality of what Jonathan talks about, obviously I encourage checking out these recordings. So Jonathan, thank you for sharing your message. And for those listening, thank you for listening, and enjoy the journey.